How powerful is Singapore? Well, for starters, Singapore is a tiny island in Southeast Asia with a population of a little over 5 million packed into 277 square miles. That's roughly, if everyone in Minnesota squeezed into an area the size of San Francisco. Along with South Korea, Taiwan, and Hong Kong, Singapore is one of the 4 Asian tigers, nations that have experienced significant growth since the 1960s and have high-income economies. Their GDP is nearly $300 billion. And they are 9th in the world in terms of per capita GDP, although overall they rank 37th in the global economy. One of the primary reasons for Singapore's wealth is that they operate the largest and busiest transshipment port in the world. In short, Singapore is rich. So what are they spending their money on? Well, mostly defense and guns. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, Singapore is the 5th largest arms importer in the world after India, China, Pakistan, and South Korea. Singapore has a formidable military force. In particular, the Singaporean Air Force is the largest, best trained, and most equipped flying force in Southeast Asia. Singapore also has mandatory 2-year conscription of all 18-year-old males, meaning that Singapore sits on more than 1 million reserve troops should they ever need them. As a result of this military stockpiling, Singapore has a very close relationship with the United States. In fact, the U.S. is the primary buyer of Singaporean military equipment, making up 43% of their total sales. Singapore also enjoys friendly diplomatic relations with most of the developed Western world, with the exception of their neighbor, Malaysia. This primarily stems from having been expelled from Malaysian rule in 1965 over policy disputes, and later disagreements over land ownership in the South China Sea. However, the two countries rely on each other heavily for trade, and in recent years have largely resolved their issues through new leadership. With a huge cash surplus, tremendous military, and close relations with the United States, Singapore might not be a traditional international behemoth in regards to land size, but it certainly stands on its own as one of the best equipped and most powerful countries in Southeast Asia. Danger? Exactly how powerful are they? Australia is strong, but it's not a global force. The nation is surrounded by water, which is patrolled by the Australian Defence Force, the largest military in Oceania. However, the nations that make up Oceania are relatively small. Australia only ranks 20th on the global firepower list, behind smaller countries like Indonesia, Poland, and Taiwan. Its greatest power may lie in their defence. Australia's remote location makes any invasion difficult and costly. The Australian defence budget is large and is slated to grow by over 6% to almost $30 billion in 2015, and plans are set for more growth in the upcoming years. But this increase seems to be reactionary, trying to keep up with their trading partner and neighbor China, who has steadily increased their military spending over the past 30 years, specifically growing their navy to the 2nd largest in the world. 80% of China's oil shipments travel through the Indian Ocean, which Australia also shares with other major world powers like India and Pakistan. Some may see Australia as geographically isolated, but an increase in activity in the waterways around them has forced their military to grow larger. Another aspect of Australia's power comes from careful alliances. The United States remains Australia's closest military ally, but Australia is also forging stronger economic ties to Indonesia and China. China is Australia's largest trading partner, and over half of Australia's natural resource exports do go to China. Their strongest economic ties most likely ensure peace between the two nations, despite occasional military posturing on both sides. Australia is also part of many peacekeeping organizations like the UN, the G20, which they recently hosted, and the East Asia Summit, which includes major world powers like the US, Japan, Russia, and India. This complex diplomacy with other nations is symptomatic of countries like Australia, Canada, or Norway, referred to by some as creative middle powers. They have the ability to work with many different countries, big or small, on very important issues. Australia is also economically strong. They had the 12th highest GDP in 2014, but there are signs that that may not last. Their mining industry is currently taking a hit. Australia is home to major deposits of iron ore, gold, and uranium, and is the world's leading supplier of bauxite. All in all, the profits from mining make up 10% of the country's total GDP. The price of these resources has plummeted recently, partially due to the slowing of China's economy, again, Australia's biggest trading partner. So Australia does wield some economic power, but with their dollar at a 5-year low, they may be headed towards a recession. Australia may never become a superpower, but it will remain a steadfastly independent and well-protected nation that has the ability to influence major world issues.